Good morning, folks. My name is Jason Watterson, and today we're going to talk about ethics. This is one of my favorite presentations to do in a group where we can have a discussion and be able to talk about this information because I think this is pretty thought-provoking, and it's something that each of us has to make some own decisions around. There is no absolute when it comes to ethics, and so it's something that each of us makes choices around. And I think those choices are better made, or those thoughts around this are better made in a group where we can discuss and talk about these things. However, we need to record a session of this so we have it available to folks who can't get to a live session. And so that's what we're going to do today. And I'm going to do my best to help you understand this topic. And believe me when I say understand, it's a little bit of a challenging topic. This is one that many philosophers from Plato and Aristotle all the way down to many people today have argued and battled back and forth about what is right and what is wrong. And like I said, there's no absolutes when it comes to some of these things. Some ethical decisions are up in the air. And so as we go through this, ask yourself some of these questions and let's see how we do. All right, let's get going. Do you consider yourself an ethical person? Now, when I ask this question in a group of people, generally people in the room are like, "Yeah, I'm an ethical person." Well, we're going to ask some questions today and maybe challenge that just a little bit. As I've studied and learned about this subject more, I've kind of found that there are a few decisions that I made in my life that maybe weren't the most ethical. There are also times when I've made some good decisions, and there are things I can look back on and say, you know what, that was the right choice to make. So let's ask some questions as we go through. Hey, does your organization have an ethics policy? If it does, where is it located? Is that something that you've read? Is there something that is written down that says this is how we behave as an organization? How our individuals working at this organization should behave? Okay. So ask yourself if you know where that is, and have you read that recently? Ask another question. Have you ever taken a gift from a vendor? Now, does that automatically qualify as an unethical decision? No, not necessarily, but it could. Does the value of that gift have anything to do whether it's an ethical decision or not? Or does the value of that gift have any bearing on whether you make a decision or not? Okay. You ever taken a donut from maybe Jason from the trust passing out donuts at a training? Did that impact any decisions that you have made? I think that's a pretty easy one. You come to a training that the trust is providing, and Jason hands out donuts there. You probably don't make any decisions differently about working with the trust or about anything in your life based on that donut. So I don't think there's a whole lot of ethical going on around donuts. Now, there may be some health issues and things like that. You may have to consider whether that donut's the right thing. But in general, that donut isn't going to make a whole lot of difference to us. If it does, well, then that could be an ethical conundrum. You ever gone to lunch with a vendor? Similar question there. What did that influence you to do? If it didn't influence a decision one way or another, that lunch is probably just an opportunity to have a chat over business or something else. Okay. Ethics is an interesting thing. What's the definition of ethics, and what does ethics mean to you? Um, from from the study that I've done, it talks about ethics are rules of behavior based on morals. Now we got to ask a question, what are morals? And when I teach this presentation, most people will respond with, well, morals are right and wrong. Okay, that's I agree with that. How do we know right and wrong? Where do we learn right and wrong from? Who was the person that taught us right and wrong, or people, or organizations, or cultures, or communities? All of those things help to build our morals. Are your morals the same as the person you're sitting next to? Are your morals the same as your community, or the country, or another country around the world? This is really asking the decision: is it right? Is it wrong? And this goes way back. In Latin, they talked about the word moralis, manner, character, proper behavior. It's right versus wrong. And so I asked that question: who taught you, or continues to teach you, right versus wrong? I think back to my experience through life. There have been a number of people throughout my life that have taught me that, some in a very positive way and some in not so positive a way. Sometimes I was doing the right thing in this situation, and sometimes I wasn't, and sometimes it was the principal that taught me some lessons. But I think back to one experience that I had, with my father at a very young age. I wasn't terribly old. I might have been 7 or 8 years old at the time, and there was one momentous day when my dad would wash his truck. It was the old farm truck, and it didn't get washed very often. And living on the Muddy Road Ranch, that was a pretty momentous thing. Was when Dad took this truck to town to get it washed. Well, I was the lucky kid that got to go along with Dad and be there for the boring task of washing off the inches of mud from the old Chevy pickup. Well, while my father was busily washing the truck, I was a 7 or 8 year old kid wandering around the car wash, trying to keep my mind and my hands busy. Well, I looked and I found some vending machines. And my mind got going because I knew my dad had a pocket full of quarters, because he was washing the truck and he was ready to ready to keep feeding those into the machine. And so I knew there was a pretty good chance that if I went and talked to my dad, he would give me a quarter to go buy a candy bar. And that's how long ago it was. It was a quarter. Um, so I went and I pestered my dad until he gave me some change to go and buy a candy bar. And I went over to the machine and I searched through and I found the candy bar that I wanted. And I figured out which lever I had to pull. It was one of those old kinds you'd pull the lever and it'd tip up and drop the candy bar out. And I got my candy bar. But I'm a 7 or 8 year old boy and I'm looking around for something to do. So I pull another lever. And guess what happened? Another candy bar came out. So guess what this 7 or 8 year old boy did? I pulled all of the levers. And I had a whole armful of candy bars when I walked over to my dad and said, "Hey, Dad, look what I got." And Dad looked at me with a concerned look on his face. "Well, how did you get all those candy bars?" Well, and I told him the story. I kept pulling the levers. Well, here was that moment. What did Dad teach me? He says, "Son, you didn't purchase those things. Those are not yours. You need to take those back and put those back in the machine," except for that almond joy right there. So we had a good opportunity there to teach me right versus wrong. And I know every one of you probably had an experience like that with a parent, with a teacher, with somebody like that, where we learned one of those lessons. This property is not yours. You need to keep your hands off of it. Okay. So let's ask a question from a moral standpoint then. Um, when we make a statement like killing is wrong, what kind of punctuation would you put in after that sentence? Is it an exclamation point? I stand by that, and killing is absolutely wrong. There's a period similar. Killing is wrong with a question mark, or a comma after that. What does that mean? What's your stance on killing? Well, some of you out there probably want some more some more clarification to this. If we put this picture on the screen and that mosquito is just drilling into your hand, how do you feel about killing now? Are you going to smash that insect and prevent it from biting you? I'll tell you, from my standpoint, I'm absolutely smashing that bug. It is going down. Okay. Well, some of you may say, well, killing people is wrong, and I stand by that. Um, well, we may have to look a little further on that. We've seen some pretty horrific things happen around the world in past years. And you don't have to go many years back or even months to see people doing some horrific things. If you had the opportunity to push a button and it would send a missile and take out those people who have done those horrific things, would you do it? That's an interesting ethical question. All right, let's take it back a little closer to home. You're walking through the parking lot coming into work and you find a wallet. Somebody dropped their wallet out in the parking lot. What would you do at that point? And it's a bit interesting as I've led this session, this discussion in the past, most people are saying, well, I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to take it into the front desk or management or whatever. I'm going to protect that even more so than if it were my own property, because I would like somebody else to do that for me if I ever drop my wallet. It's something that the vast majority of people that I poll in these discussions say, yeah, absolutely, I'm picking up the wallet and I'm not going to grab the cash out of it. I'm going to take it and I'm going to protect that property. Okay. Most people are really, really confident in that answer. Okay. Well, let's change it up just a little bit. How about a buck? You drop or you find $1 out in the parking lot. Is that any different? We might have to make it a $5 bill due to inflation to make it valuable enough to pick up. Would you pick up the dollar? And what would you do at that point once you picked it up? Put it in your pocket. Let's say it's a $5 bill. You put it in your pocket. Hey, there's a candy bar or a drink, or if you can find a restaurant that hasn't inflated, you might even be able to get close to having part of lunch with that $5. What do you do with it? Is that a different decision? That is an ethical decision in my mind. Okay. Let's ask some other question. Moral justification. There are times when we can try to shine a favorable light on something that is a bad ethical decision. And I got to tell you, there have been times when there was one time in my life when I had a vehicle that I wanted to sell, an old 73 Ford Bronco. And it was pretty rough. It had some problems and it had some challenges, but I decided I was going to sell it. And I made a decision at that point. I said, I am going to tell anybody that wants to buy this thing everything that's wrong with it. I'm just going to be 100% honest about every little thing. And guess what? To this day, I still own that 73 Ford Bronco. Now, I think I probably came out ahead on that. I choose to think that's because because I made a good moral decision and decided I would be honest. Nobody wanted to buy the car because I was 100% honest about it. And I still have that. But we think about that. Do we get out the industrial strength turd polish and polish that turd to shine a favorable light on something that may be less than ethical? All right. Well, how do we? I'll ask a question to start. Next, can there be more than one right choice? And I think it's fairly obvious that there are times when there definitely can be more than one right choice. There can be multiples. Is there one better than the other? How do we go about making the right choice? And that's really what ethics is what to do when you're presented with more than one right choice. Sometimes right and wrong is far easier than the gray areas. All right, so make the best right choice. How do we do that? How do we go about making good ethical decisions? Let's think about some of the factors that go into that. One of those are the law. Now, sometimes there are legal requirements, laws on the books that tell us how we should behave. You know, murder is one of those, robbing people, burglary, those types of things, even speeding are things that are on the books that are laws that govern our behavior. Sometimes departmental policies. Our company has a specific policy on some things, and that can be vastly different from one company to another. And in the government sphere, we have to perform at a higher level than others based on based on being in government service in and using taxpayer dollars. We have a certain level of increased requirements that private sector may not have. However, there are private companies that have far more stringent ethical policies than maybe we have just on a general governmental level. And our own personal ethics. I think that's a big part of the decisions that we make is day in, day out. What does it mean to me in my heart when I make these decisions? What is right and what is wrong? Well, there was a really smart guy named Potter Stewart. He was a Supreme Court justice back in the 80s. He said this: ethics is knowing the difference between what you have a right to do and what is right to do. And I think that is a pretty profound thing for us to think about. At least it is in my book. It is what is right. It may not just be something that you have a right to do. So ethical acts are legal. Legal acts may not necessarily be ethical. I could do some pretty ugly things that are legal, but they're not ethical things. So ethics versus the law. What are laws? Laws are created by a governing body for the protection of society. Like we talk, simple things like don't kill people. Speeding, the speed limit is something that is designed to protect society, to keep people from being injured. All right, we have some very specific laws when it comes to the government space in the state of Utah, and we want to go through each one of those. I think it's kind of interesting that we govern ethics. Because ethics, in my mind, is something that we make as a free choice. It's right or wrong. But in the state, we call these things ethics acts. And so let's go through each one of those because as governmental employees, we have some obligations that we have to fill or things that we should or that we may and may not do. Okay, so let's talk about each one of these, and I'll try to go through these quickly. This is the County Officers and Employees Disclosure Act. And just a reminder on each one of these, I'm going to talk about counties today. There is an equivalent version for municipal employees as well. So if you're working at a city or a special service district, these laws will really cover you. So even if I say this, I just for the sake of space, I'm not going to talk about both of those, but just realize that when I say county, I mean all governmental agencies in the state of Utah. Okay, so Title 17, we start out prohibited use of official position, no disclosure of confidential info to secure special privileges. Okay, we can't give out information of this is a decision that the government's going to make. We can't do something for some extra money, right? And in this, they talk about no gifts or loans greater than $50. This is that statute that says if a vendor gives you something or somebody in the community gives you something, it can't have a value of more than $50. Okay. Now, remember, as we're talking about that, just because it's $50, less than $50 doesn't necessarily mean that's 100% ethical. I could get something for $20, and if it influences the decision I make or the me giving out information like it says here, that could be an unethical act as well. But that $50 is something that we should keep in mind if somebody offers us something, a gift, a loan of cash. Okay, let's look at the next one. No compensation for assistance in transactions with the county, city, etc., unless we are given notice 10 days prior to agreement. Now, what does this mean? Are we, if we're doing as part of our job, we have certain information or certain skills, something like that, and somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I will pay you a consulting fee to help me get this permit through or to help me with this or that. That is something that can be found illegal unless I've gone through the process and say, hey, being open, I'm going to disclose this ahead of time and get approval from my supervisor, from the boss, or whatever level that needs to be. I think that's a very slippery slope there, and we should be very careful about going out and doing consulting work for somebody that we are regulating or that we're doing transactions with on that subject with our organization. Okay. All right. Next one. County Officers and Employees Disclosure Act. Interest in business entity regulated by the county disclosures, what it's called. So what this means is if I have some interest in a business, let's take me for example. I work for Utah Local Governments Trust, and my company, we're a governmental agency as well. We provide insurance and risk management services to the vast majority of local government agencies in the state. Well, I also, in my spare time, volunteer as a member of the Planning Commission for my county where I live. And in doing so, I have a potential conflict because I'm doing business with that or with the organization, the county, as well. And so now that doesn't mean that I'm in trouble or that I've done anything wrong. It just means that there's a potential conflict. And so I disclose that. Now, there are forms that your organization will probably have you sign. That is a sworn statement that says, "Hey, here's what I'm doing. I have a business interest in this. I'm an employee of Utah Local Governments Trust who sells insurance to the county where I am also volunteering as an appointed Planning Commission member." Okay. And that's a pretty simple thing. What it is, we want to be above board when it comes to the things, our business engagements, if they have interaction with a governmental agency that for me, that I'm working for two different governmental agencies. Okay. All right. I think I covered that. Investment creating conflict of interest with duties. This is very similar. But it's also something that if we are an appointed or elected official, or somebody that is commenting from a staff position in an open meeting about this, and I have a business investment or other interaction there, I need to disclose that in public meeting and say, I have this personal interest in this. So it's above board. We want to have transparency when it comes to these things. So it's not seen that, hey, this person's working behind the scenes to make this happen. Okay, next one. Utah nepotism law. This is something that is fairly unique to government agencies, and it says no public officer may employ, appoint, or vote for or recommend the appointment of a relative. Now, some of you out there right now are going, I know of a few situations. Well, there are some exceptions to this. Just to clarify the whole part of this law, no public officer may directly supervise an employee who is a relative. Okay, so that's one part of it. We cannot supervise them. There are some exceptions there. If somebody was an employee and then their uncle was elected to the county commission or to an elected office, there are some exceptions there. We'd want to be careful about how we go about those things, and hopefully they're not directly supervising them. No appointee may accept or retain employment if he is paid from public funds and he is under the direct supervision of a relative. So we've got to watch those things. Now, some of the exceptions to this is if there's nobody else that can do the job. So some of our really small counties and cities and districts out and around the state, there may be only one accountant in the county. right? Those are limited, I know, but that may be the situation. There's just nobody else that's able to do this job because we have limited number of people in the area, and especially people that have those skills. So we just want to be straight up with those things and make sure that we are disclosing that and are open with those things, so we handle that appropriately. Okay, keeping going. House Bill 163 was passed several years ago, and it talks about misuse of public property. And what it was really focused around was it was found that some people working for governmental organizations in the state had been purchasing property that really didn't have a whole lot to do with the governmental function. They were purchasing cameras and computers and things like that that really didn't have anything to do with the job or the overall goals of that organization. And so the legislature passed this. And let's talk about what it is. Personal use expenditure. This is something that is banned under this law. Means an expenditure made without the authority of law that is not directly related to the performance of an activity as a state officer or employee. So if I go out and purchase something that doesn't have anything to do with what I am trying to accomplish in my job description, right? Or the organization's goals. Primarily furthers a personal interest of a state officer or employee of a state officer's or employee's family, friend, or associate, and would constitute taxable income under federal law. All right. So if I get something, I use public funds to purchase something for my organization, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the goals of our organization. That could be in violation of this. And this is a serious thing. It's something that could be a felony. And so we have to be careful. And if you do a very strict reading of it, if I take a pen home from work, that potentially could be constituting a personal use expenditure. So we want to be really careful about those things, and purchases that we make sure that we are having a line of authority there that will rubber stamp those things or approve those types of purchases, so we're not seen as going out and doing that. Okay, personal misconduct. A public servant is guilty of a Class B misdemeanor if, with intent to benefit himself or another, or to harm another, he knowingly commits an unauthorized act that purports to be an act of his or her office, or knowingly refrains from performing duty imposed upon him or her by law, or that is clearly inherent in the nature of his or her office. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that we use our office to benefit somebody, or to get even with somebody, or hurt somebody, and make that look like it's an official act. It's something as part of our office, but it's really done with the intent to hurt somebody or benefit or enrich the person or somebody else. That's official misconduct. Okay. Receiving or soliciting bribes. What is this? A person is guilty of receiving or soliciting a bribe if that person asks for, solicits, accepts, or receives, directly or indirectly, any benefit with the understanding that understanding or agreement that the purpose or intent is to influence an action, decision, opinion, blah, 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 blah. All right. So if we take something of value with the understanding that I'm going to change my decision, I'm going to make a decision a certain way. Now, obviously, this is really looking at public officials, but it certainly could be staff as well. Law enforcement as well could be part of this. Hey, I really don't want to get a speeding ticket today. Here's some tickets to a ball game, or here's some cash or something of value. That would be receiving or soliciting a bribe. So I don't actually have to get anything out from that. If I ask for a bribe, that is something that would be going over the edge in this law. All right. Improperly disclosing or using private, controlled, or protected information. So if we have access to certain information, there's a lot of personal identifiable information that we have that could be detrimental to another person, that could cause them to have identity theft happen, something like that. And we use our position to be able to disclose that information, um, to harm somebody, to make gain financially over those things. We sell some information that we have that is illegal under this act. Okay. There are a lot of, I know that was a lot of stuff that we hit you with there. And let me just say, on all of these Utah codes, um, there are there are plenty of questions to be asked. I can't answer all of these at this time. If you have questions about this, talk to your supervisor, talk to your human resources office, and they can help you through to answer those questions. You may be asked to sign some forms around these. This is not saying that you're in trouble or anything like that, but you saw where we had some disclosures that were required under the variety of these laws, and those are important for us to have in place as a protection for us as well as the community. All right, there are other laws, and we won't take time to go through these, but just remember that laws can impose duties upon us. Speaking of that, what is a duty? This is an obligation that we have. In here it says ethics involve consideration for duty and for what is the right response when a conflict arises. So a duty is a moral or legal obligation. Do we have a duty to do a certain thing? Let's say that you're a law enforcement officer and you pull over a vehicle who the driver of that vehicle appears that they may be intoxicated. The car's weaving around, doing some things that would indicate to you that there's potential impairment with that person. You pull that person over and you walk up, and the driver's a coworker. How about the driver's your boss? Or maybe the coworker is a county commissioner or the mayor or somebody in the community that is a powerful person, has a lot of influence. What do you do in that scenario? Who do you owe a duty to? Ask ourselves that question. And I think, as I've had these discussions around the state, most law enforcement officers are like, lock them up, right? It doesn't matter what their position is. We have a duty to the community to keep unsafe drivers off the road. If somebody's out there going to get in a crash and hurt people, we have a duty to keep them keep them off the road. So what is a duty? Who is impacted? Who do we owe a duty to? Ask yourself some of these questions. Who is impacted? What is the impact? And to who do I owe a duty? That's a really interesting question that we have to ask ourselves, because sometimes I may owe a duty to more than one person or organization, and I have to look at that and say, who is impacted? What is the degree of impact? And what is the best right decision? That's not always easy. Who are the stakeholders on this as well? Ask yourself about your family, yourself, coworkers, employer, the community. All of these people are stakeholders in this. These are sometimes very difficult decisions. I had one years ago when I took a job for the Olympics. I was working as risk manager, and I took this job. I was excited about it when I went to my first day orientation. I go to headquarters down in Salt Lake, and I sit down in there with lots of information about company policies and insurance and all those things that human resource folks do in their first day orientation training. Well, every job that I'd had up to that point, I had every real job anyway. I'd had to do a drug screen prior to taking on that job, and to this point, I hadn't had to do a drug screen, and so I went into this, and really most of my interviews were done remotely, and so I hadn't been there. So I went in fully anticipating doing a drug screen, and I and so I prepared for having to do a drug screen. I didn't use the restroom that day, so I could deliver a sample when it was required. And the training went on, and we're approaching lunch, and we went to a break, and I went up to one of the people doing the training. I said, "Hey, are we going to do drug screens today? Because I kind of got to go." And they said, "Oh, we don't do that." And so I excused myself and took care of business. And at the same time, I'm thinking, what? This organization doesn't do drug screens. Now, I had been involved with a number of situations over, investigating incidents that had happened where drug use or alcohol use had been a factor. And in those, I saw some pretty ugly things happen. Some people got hurt really bad because of people's decisions to be impaired while they were working. And so from an ethical standpoint, I felt like drug and alcohol testing was a important part of protecting people and employees of the company and the community, and particularly in an organization like the Olympics, where we're really going to have an impact on the community and really the world. And so I made a point to run this up the flagpole and ask the questions. Hey, why aren't we doing this? What's the problem here? Or, why have we not done this? And I got shut down. I was told under no circumstances should I take this any further, and that I might not be working there if I kept pushing it. Well, I took that as and that came from a vice president level. I thought, okay, they've made the decision for me, and I can go on and do the other important things that I need to. Still bugged me a little bit, but I knew that I couldn't go down that road any further, and that the organization had made the decision. So fast forward some time, there was an accident involving some staff, and it turned out that some substance abuse was involved in this accident that happened. Hit the news media and all of that. Well, there was a meeting held shortly after this with this guy. Now, whatever you think about Mitt Romney and his politics and all of that, just keep listening to the story. I worked with Mitt, and I saw this happen. So this meeting happened, and Mitt gets up in front of the group of all the vice presidents and the COO and all of those folks, and says, what happened in this incident? Ask questions about that. Says, and he asks the VP who would shut me down, well, we drug screen our staff, right? And this VP says, no, we don't. And Mitt says, why are we not drug screening our employees? And this VP said, do you know how many people we would lose if we drug screened our employees? And this was the moment that I gained a lot of respect for Mitt Romney. And he said, it doesn't matter to the VP, and was very stern and said, this is the right thing to do. We must do this. And we put that program in place. And guess what? We lost some staff. And guess what? The Olympics happened. And it was a great event that we were able to pull off, and we were able to do it. And so when we talk about these things, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the right thing when nobody's watching? Are we doing the right thing when it hurts? Because there was a consequence from doing that. Okay. So let's just talk about a couple of ethical decision-making questions. Your boss compliments you for somebody else's work. What would you do? You have inside knowledge that they're going to build a Costco on a certain piece of property that is up for sale cheap. What do you do at that point? Taking a sick day, is that an ethical thing? Fudging numbers on a report to make it look better. How about from law enforcement world? Um, I should go back just a second. Years ago, I did some training for a city, a police department in a city, and they looked for a special training that really wasn't available. Chief called me up and said, "Hey Jason, I really need this training. Could you provide it?" And I said, "Well, I don't have it right now, but if you give me a couple of months, I will put it together and we'll do the training for you." And so we did that. Chief was really happy for that training. Um, and as a thanks for that, he gave me a mug from the PD, one of these nice vacuum mugs, and it was a nice thing. Wasn't worth $50 or anything like that. I didn't ask for it. It was just when we got done, he said, "Thank you so much for doing the training. Here's a mug," and I liked it. I took it. I used it. It kept my soda cold. And fast forward a few months after that, I was going to a training early in the morning, and I'd been up for a while getting stuff ready. And I was kind of dragging. And so I thought, I've got to stop and get a soda, get a little caffeine in me to make sure I'm up and ready to do this training. And so I pulled in this convenience store. I went in, filled up my mug with soda, and I went up to the check stand to pay for my soda. And the guy behind the counter says, "You're good." And I said, "I haven't paid." And he says, "You're good." And I said, "I haven't paid. Here's some money." And he says, "Get out of here." And I said, "Well, okay, I guess it's free soda day." And so I got back in my car, and I'm and I'm driving down the road thinking how this was kind of an odd thing. And as I picked up my soda to take a drink, I looked down at the side of the soda, and it had the police department's logo on it. Um, and I thought, "Oh, I just got the cop discount. I got the free soda. Did I deserve that? No. Did I go back and pay for it? Now that's probably my ethical conundrum there, is I didn't go back and pay for the soda refill. Um, what about that? Is it okay for law enforcement officers to get free coffee or soda at the convenience store, or a discount on meals at a restaurant? Well, I think these are interesting questions. I don't have any issues with officers getting a free soda or coffee at the convenience store. Now, what is the owner of the store expecting from that? Well, they expect cops to be by their convenience store, and so they're less likely to get robbed or have problems that way. I don't have an issue with that as long as we're not making decisions based on that. Because this store gives me a free cup of coffee, am I making decisions differently based around that? Asking a traffic violator for a date. We obviously know those are some ethical things that we really shouldn't get into. Ethical choices. No citation for a police officer at fault in an accident. Okay. Investigate criminal history of your neighbor. Some of us, maybe not law enforcement, but other things, have access to information. Would you investigate your ex-husband or wife's new romantic squeeze, right? Their new squeeze. Well, that's probably an ethical problem there. Drive a drunk driver home instead of arrest. All of those things could go along with this. So we want to ask ourselves, what is the best long-term versus short-term? Where should we lean when we're making our decisions? Well, I think obviously the long-term best thing that will impact the most people, the people that we owe duties to, that's where we should lean to in making our decisions. Which is better? That's the hard part, determining what those things are. Um, and it's really been shown that individuals and organizations who demonstrate high ethical values are more successful over the long run. If we make ethical decisions day in, day out, that will lead to us being more successful in the long run. Now, in the short term, it may not, but over the long run, I believe that that will help us be more successful. What do you think about that? Is that true in your estimation as well? So just remember, ethics is doing the right thing when nobody's looking, doing the right thing when it hurts, even when it hurts. All right. So, just in summary, ethical decisions are done making the best right choice. Just remember that not all legal acts are ethical. Just because hey, I've got the right to do it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. Duty is a moral legal obligation, and decisions require consideration of who do we owe a duty to? Do we owe a duty to our employer? And I think that is an absolute yes. How far does that duty go is where it becomes challenging. Decisions, the best choice for the most people over the long run. Those are the important things that will help us make good choices. Is it a perfect science? Nope, it isn't. It's challenging, and that's why ethical choices are such a fun thing to discuss, and why they become so challenging. Thank you, folks, for your time. I appreciate all the work that you do, and I appreciate you thinking about this and making good ethical decisions to make Utah a better, safer place. Thanks so much.